We are. Looks like we're live. All right, man. You ready for the show?
I'm ready for the show.
In 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of DSLR Film NOOB Podcast. Devin joins me today to discuss all kinds of new stuff. We've got some new announcements from Olympus, sort of new announcements, and all kinds of other interesting things to talk about. Devin, first of all, what have you been up to, man?
Well, I have been gone for a while. I got really busy last Sunday night because we were actually in LA. But I did a bit of a road trip with a few friends of mine, as well as visiting a few clients around the LA area. Went to San Francisco. We also did hiking in Utah and Yosemite, and it was beautiful. It was great to get out there with my camera and just take some beautiful shots and spend enjoy nature, as well as getting that little video photography fix that I need to get. So it was an absolute blast, but I'm glad to be back.
Yosemite. So was it still all dried up and pretty sad that the waterfalls aren't flowing and everything? Because I was there about 2 months ago, and it was really dry to the bone and just really depressing.
No, it was actually the falls were going. The falls were huge. Even some of the climb was totally wet. We went on a very aggressive climb where we climbed up 2 waterfalls. It's the same river that's 2 waterfalls. We climbed up both on the same trail. And yeah, the waterfalls were full. Next day when we went to leave, actually, we ran into a bit of a problem because that morning snow just dumped. It was a huge snowfall. We had inches of snow. I'm trying to drive the rental car down these little twisty roads down and up the mountain. We actually wanted to go through Death Valley, so we ended up going way up into the mountain just to find that it's closed just because it's not summer yet. So then we had to drive an hour back just to get back to where our resort was, and then continue on for another hour to get out of Yosemite. So it was definitely full of water. It's still a desert. It's still dry, but we got to enjoy the beautiful waterfalls. I got some beautiful shots of that. And there was also heavy snowfall too, which I got a few shots of too. That was great. So I lucked out. I had working waterfalls.
Yeah, on my end, it's been pretty nice out here. Actually, for the Pacific Northwest, we've been sunshine and beauty the last month or so. And I was just on the coast this weekend doing a little bit of filming and taking the dogs out to run through all of the ocean. They've never been there before, so that was kind of an interesting bit. But enough about us. Let's go to the news. Time for the news. Time for the news. First up on my list here, and this is actually something that I've been kind of waiting on for almost a year and a half now, is the Olympus announcement coming on the 12th of this month, which should be, I believe, Tuesday. The Olympus 7 to 14 millimeter f2.8 and the new 8 millimeter fisheye. These have been in development for well over a year and a half. You can see them on B&H's pre-order list, but they just have yet to come out. Now, finally, I guess we're going to get some information also from Olympus coming very shortly. And I actually forgot to put this in the show notes, is the titanium version of the EM5 Mark II. I don't know how excited anybody is about the titanium version, but both of those are on their way. Devin, I know you shoot Micro Four Thirds quite a bit.
Yes.
Are you interested in this wide of a lens, and do you need an f2.8 aperture?
Absolutely. Are you kidding me? Micro Four Thirds, notoriously known for small sensor sizes, and anything that can get a faster lens so that low light isn't as much of a problem, as well as having more control over that shallow depth of field for when you want it. This and definitely replacing the Panasonic 7 to 14 f4 with a 7 to 14 f2.8. This I would basically consider like a standard lens to put on your Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera with that 3x crop. This 7 to 14 is really going to kind of make it a standard zoom and a very usable zoom, where I could see with something like that, I could see using that secondary camera in a lot more situations, because getting wide on it is always a struggle. And then if you get wide, you never have fast glass. And then you run into this situation of trying to, somehow find a place where you can fit it, where it works, or using telephoto glass and just setting it up in the back on a tripod and not really doing anything creative or handheld with it, just because of limit of options. So something like this is, I think, totally, I wouldn't say necessary, but I would say that it is one of the things to definitely look at if you're a big fan of the Blackmagic Micro Four Third cameras, both, the cinema as well as the pocket cam that a lot of people have now.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the cinema camera, the Blackmagic Pocket cinema camera, is a 3.01 or 02 crop factor, something weird like that.
Most people just call three, but yeah.
So 3. So a 7 to 14 would be a 21 to 42, roughly somewhere in there. So yeah, you're right. That is actually a pretty practical zoom range for. It's not wide on the pocket camera at all, but yeah, that isn't too bad. I don't use the pocket camera, so my crop factor is right at 2 or a little bit below for Micro Four Thirds cameras, the GH4 body. But this gives me about a 14 to 28, which that's a bit wider than my 16 to 35 on a full frame body. So it's really enjoyable to shoot with wide.
Well, and you have the speed. Like, that's part of it too, is that you have the speed and you also have a small lens, because that's part of Micro Four Thirds, is that interest in like keeping gear light, keeping gear small, so you can carry more gear with you and get more done. And 2.8 makes it extremely flexible for all kinds of situations. When my wides are 3.5 or even more and they're 4, like the Panasonic, it makes me then not pull it out very often if I'm ever shooting indoors or I'm not in a studio environment. I pretty much exclusively only shoot with it when I'm outside. So that kind of limits how often I can go wide with that camera. And the 2.8 here, you really only find that with the primes, and they're very pricey too. So for this, you get a lot for your money.
Now, when you're talking about size, though, Olympus, their Pro line, does tend to be quite a bit bulkier than some of the other offerings from like Panasonic. Their 12 to 35 millimeter Panasonic lens versus the 12 to 40 millimeter Olympus lens, there's a very sizable difference in build quality and in the package itself. I would say it's at least 1.3 times bigger than the Panasonic version. So this could still be a fairly chunky guy. And I'm looking at the pictures right now of the 12 to 40 millimeter f2.8 and the 7 to 14, and it looks to be
about the same
maybe
size.
An inch. Yeah, maybe a little bit bigger, because it's got the bubbled front and the built-in flower hood. So yeah, you're probably talking maybe an inch bigger than that. So it could be fairly substantial. As far as regular lenses go, it's not going to hit, but yeah, it might be a chunky little guy. I was actually surprised by the size of the Panasonic 7 to 14 millimeter f4. That guy is maybe 3.5, 4 inches tall at most. It is really petite, and I have been enjoying getting that wide on my Micro Four Thirds camera. That was one of the big things I was missing out on when I moved to that. As far as the fisheye goes, 8 millimeter, you need a fisheye in your collection?
Most of the time, no. I mean, I do know people who do it in for realtor showing off houses. Yeah, that's always the thing that people go to. And I've seen really good tutorials, especially if you're shooting 4K on a GH4, for defishing it, because you have the extra pixel real estate that you can defish it, and it doesn't look all smeary and gross because you have extra resolution to resolve that detail. But I could also see it being used on drones too. I'm sure the 714 is probably going to weigh a bit, just like the 12 to 40 that Olympus put out. But still, to me, if you're running larger hexacopters or something like that, this also becomes a great camera if you're doing a lot of drone stuff, because drone people love shooting wide, so they get the whole, the feeling of the big landscape and whatnot. So I'm all about that too. I think that this could work great in a lot of situations. Going 8 millimeter, I don't know. Like, for a prime, you see, that's the great part, is that with the zoom, it's flexible, so I can shoot telephoto if I need to. But with a wide like that, and how much they'll probably price it at, knowing how much the rest of their line costs, makes me think that it's not worth it, because I'd probably only end up using it on the Blackmagic Pocket camera. And if I've got a 7 to 14 at 2.8, I don't really need that much more speed or anything more wide than that. So I'm not sure that I'd be interested in seeing when that comes out, but the 7 to 14 is really exciting.
I'm looking around right now, and I'm trying to find the aperture size for the 8 millimeter, but it looks okay. Here it is. F1.8 is what we're looking at for the 8 millimeter. So it is it is pretty wide
It is
open.
fast. Yeah. Wides, it's hard to get wides that are fast. Usually you're looking at 3.5 at the best, unless you're buying really big expensive stuff at 2.8. So, but it's one of those that I don't necessarily need wide and fast. I think 2.8 is plenty for a lot of situations. I would consider that more of a specialty lens. I maybe would rent it if I need to do a special effect. You never know. Maybe you're doing like a snorri cam or something like that, where you've got the camera right in the actor's face and you need it to be wide, and shallow depth of field is something that you're looking for as well with a wide. So
yeah, but even at f1.8 on a micro four thirds, or you're not gonna get that shallow depth. I mean, you'd really have to be right on top of your subject in order to get something like that.
That's why I said snorri cam, like Requiem for a Dream, where you have the cameras like a foot away from the actor's face.
Yeah.
They're like walking and showing stuff in the background. Like I said, that, or I don't know, this is possibly more creative macro photography. Depends what the minimal focal distance is on it. But it's one of those things I'd probably rent and play around with because it'd be fun, but I don't think I'd ever own.
Well, I think the guesstimated price on the f1.8 8mm lens is going to be around $500 to $600. So that is pretty pricey. If you really want all the prime, maybe go for it. Otherwise, I'm excited about the 7 to 14. Hopefully this thing isn't going to hit the crazy price range of $2,000 that some of these Olympus lenses seem to fetch when they're brand new. So I'll keep an eye out for that. As soon as the announcement comes out, we'll add that to next week's show. Moving on to some other new stuff here, the Nikon J5. Apparently there's been a J1 through 5 of these. I am not very familiar with this camera at all, but I did see on Tech Radar a very interesting post that kind of compares the Nikon J5 to the Panasonic GM5, the Samsung NEX Mini, and the Sony RX100 Mark III. And it looks like it's sort of maintaining a mid to low level range of quality here. Going through the test results, the Nikon J5 is sort of in the middle to lower performance levels for both the dynamic range and sharpness across the board for image quality. So I don't know, resolution wise, and I shouldn't say sharpness, resolution. So I don't know. Is this on your radar at all? Are you even remotely excited about any of Nikon's new stuff? I keep trying to put Nikon stuff into the rundown, but every time I look at it, I'm just kind of like, what? Really? Okay. Another thing that's there that Nikon does that I don't care about.
I mean, once again, this is an interesting line of cameras that I think have been growing in popularity, and that could just be a biased opinion, but small, basically the size of a point and shoot, but with interchangeable lenses and something that can actually use a decent range of lenses. I think the part that they're trying to kind of show remarkable about this Nikon is that it does really good dynamic range, and it's coming out $100 or so, $200 cheaper than GM5. And GM5, a lot of people consider that Lumix to kind of be the king of small cameras with interchangeable lenses, because these cameras really seem to be taking over the point and shoot market when you want to get into prosumer quality without carrying around a big bulky prosumer camera that, for some people it's also a fashion statement. Makes them, if you carry around a big 5D, it makes you look like a nerd, like a photographer.
I thought the Fuji X series was really the celebrity carry around. I've been seeing tons of people that are way wealthier than me. Just, I got this Fuji camera hanging off my shirt. Don't take any pictures with it, but I got it here just in case, It's like, what is going on here? Really?
Well, Fuji does make beautiful cameras. They've got a thing of style. I don't knock them for that. Fuji's not in any of these charts, though, in terms of noise and dynamic range and whatnot. But to me, though, a lot of this market is mad just because they're so close. I'm sure when they make these cameras, they're all playing off of tiny margins. And a lot of them, too, are sharing the same sensors and stuff like that. They have slightly different processors, but for the most part, they all kind of perform the same and function the same. And I don't fault them. I mean, if you're somebody who wants something better than a point and shoot, you want some manual control, you want wide aperture, but you don't want a DSLR because you don't necessarily care about all the manual functionality and having dials for everything everywhere. You're a casual shooter. This is exactly what this is built for. Between $300 to $800, you can have a huge pic of, hey, you know, what kit lens and everything else you want on it. But you know, of course, for me, I've got enough cameras lying around that are small and big. So something like this isn't something I'm actively looking to shoot with. I mean, the Canon came out with their little M, is it an M mount? Something like that?
Yeah, the EOS M mount is the smaller version. That's the mirrorless version of their EOS line.
Right. And I was looking at those cameras just as like crash cams, like throwaway cams, or you attach them in dangerous places if you want something that's not a GoPro. But at the end of the day, I didn't get sucked into those cameras because the price was still kind of high for the amount of performance that they produced. And they would only serve one function because they, you know, they're not like mirrorless. It's not nice. Like, I love having a DSLR when I'm shooting photos. When I don't have an EVF, I have an actual viewfinder through the lens. It's just such a better experience. But in these kind of situations, it's not for me. And if I ever bought one of these, it would just be as a B cam to shove in the corner or to strap to a car or something like that, where I go, okay, here's a $200 camera going out on a track.
Now, one of the cameras I actually recommend for people who are starting out or who are looking for a crash camera that still gives you the, you know, basically the performance of a good DSLR for video and for photography for that matter, is the T2i. That thing, it's really long in the tooth, but the T2i sensor has been used in all the way up to the T5i, and they just retired it from the 7D with the 7D Mark II. So that sensor is still a really good sensor, and you can pick that up. I'm looking on eBay right now. Used for the T2i, yeah, 300, 275. Buy it now, 222, 265. Yeah, so under $300. That camera has the best implementation of Magic Lantern hack. You can record audio, monitor audio via the USB port with a headphone adapter. Gives you all kinds of other excellent features. And there's my wife right behind me. And anyway, the thing is this camera offers a ton of features, and it's basically a full-fledged DSLR, and it's only about $250 to $300. I mean, that's a really good price, and it takes all your Canon lenses. It's not mirrorless, so you're not going to be able to adapt to as many lens types. Like FDs are probably out of the question.
But you can put Nikon on it too.
Yeah, exactly. Nikon and you know, some of the Yep, exactly. You can hook all those up to this. You can adapt to it, and it's a great freaking camera. And you know, for the price, like, you could buy this for $300, crash it, destroy it, whatever, or you can go buy a brand new camera for $700 or $800 and basically get the same quality out of it. So I always
keep updating that line. The Rebels keep updating with new features, but not necessarily new quality. So if you're low budget, all you care about is performance. You don't care about touch screens and stuff like that. You're just trying to get the best image to tell your story. And especially with the Magic Lantern, like you said, the T2i is such a solid choice for anyone who's out ready to enter into the marketplace and start shooting.
I haven't sold. I still have 2 of them in my kit that I've never sold because they come in handy as just regular studio cameras when I need to have something just basically permanently set up in the corner to shoot whatever on a regular basis. And they're so cheap, it doesn't really matter that I'm leaving them behind. I just leave them there and use them when I need to. Now, we were talking about sensors with the Nikon J5 here, and I just wanted to throw this into the lineup. And I saw this earlier this week about Sony making 40% of all cameras sold, the sensors for all cameras sold in 2014. Did you look into this at all? Have you? I know I just threw this in the show notes, and I'm kind of like blindsiding you here, but 40% of all sensors. Now,
I absolutely believe it.
Of course, this does account for cell phone cameras as well, so that probably helps sway the margins. But man, Sony is really in a lot of cameras. And then that got me thinking, well, wait a minute. What is inside of the Nikon J5? Is that a Sony sensor, or does Nikon make it? Because I know a lot of Nikon's cameras use Sony sensors, and that's been pretty true for the last like 3 or 4 generations. I don't know if they do or not. I'll have to do some more research on that. But man, maybe that's why when you're looking at the specs from that Tech Radar article, all of those chips are kind of performing almost in line with each other. the J5 is a little bit lower on the threshold, but maybe it's a processing issue as opposed to the sensor itself. Maybe the image sensor is doing fine, and just the way they handle it in post with their CPU
JPEG compression and whatnot. Yeah. And that's what's incredible too, right? The Sony sensor is both in use in pretty much, as far as I've heard, pretty much every iPhone, but definitely including the latest, as well as all the Samsung products, which, let's face it, Samsung right now with the S6 and everything else is number 2 on the smartphone scale, right behind iPhone. I mean, I know iPhone's starting to take market share away, and this isn't a cell phone podcast, but you know, everyone always says how great the iPhone camera looks and everything else, and you know, it's a Sony sensor, just like a lot of other things. I mean, of course, Apple does their own little manipulation of the image and everything else, and they tune it in. But yeah, it's not surprising to me, especially knowing that they have huge market share in tiny cameras, like cell phones and things like that. Stuff that you're talking about, the sensor the size of an eraser head. Sony, I think, really dominates that market. From a lot of what I've seen and how many small electronic pieces are using Sony sensors. And so if you're including all of those, then yeah, 40% makes a lot of sense to me. If you're just looking at DSLRs or professional cameras, I'm sure that number's way lower because everyone's kind of got their own thing going on in that marketplace. But overall, you know, and A7S, do I need to say more?
Yeah, that's a great sensor. I love the A7S. There's a lot of things that are stupid about the design, and Sony definitely hasn't really done great in the software development department. But man, as far as image quality goes, that thing is nice to use. I really enjoy it quite a bit. Now, speaking of nice to use here, sliders, and we were kind of talking about this pre-show. First of all, we want to kind of get this out there as a sort of complaint for filmmakers in general. Guys, don't overuse your slider. We were just watching a promo video about 2 episodes ago, and this is the that little pocket extender for your camera that brings it up off the plate. And if someone can remember what the manufacturer is, I should know this off the top of my head, and for some reason it's escaping me. But every single shot in their promo video was a slider shot all the way through from beginning to end. And it was sort of obnoxious and took you out of the shoot. Use a slider when it's necessary. Use it when it makes sense, but don't go crazy and just make everything a slider shot. And I know it's tempting to do because they look nice and motion is cool, but use it sparingly as a tool and not as a fill for everything. Now, on that note, tripod stabilizing arm here I've got from Canova. They are actually famous for making one of the very first bearing style sliders. Before that, everything was using sort of a plastic friction style system. And now they've kind of got an interesting, innovative piece here. It's a device that attaches to the leg of your tripod and goes up to the other side of your slider. So if you ever used a slider on a large tripod in the past, you'll know that when you get off to the side, the camera gets a little wonky and you either have to use 2 tripods or an extra stand of some kind. This actually uses your leg as a support, and you can extend it out and then screw it into the bottom of the tripod. You actually told me about this, and I saw it earlier, but I completely missed it. So Devin, what do you think about this guy?
You know what? I haven't used one yet, so this is all speculation, but I will say this seems like the right idea. It feels stupid that I haven't thought of it first, kind of an idea. If it does perform well, which I imagine it does, because it looks simple. It's you know, an expandable pole, and then it's just got a little I forget what you call those grips that you spin to close, like a
magic clamp.
Yeah, like a magic clamp on the end. So it's universal with any tripod, basically, that has, you know, a cylinder for a leg, which is just about all of them. I would definitely think too that you want 2 of them, and so then the price is like $170 to get 2 of them instead of $90 just to get one. But I guess too, a lot of that depends on how long your slider is and what your slider mount points are. Because I could also see too, if your slider is a little shorter, you could mount it a little off the tripod and then use the arm to stabilize the long end of it to kind of get the best of both worlds there. But I'm excited to try this out. I'm not sure if I'm going to pull the trigger yet on buying this, but it's one of those that I'm excited to try out. But once again, I don't do a lot of slider shots. And I think a great way to think about this is, once again, coming back to the YouTuber that does the channel Every Frame of Painting. He does a great video about the lateral tracking shots and what's weak about it, what's strong about it, what can you use it for, to help tell your story. And this is one of those situations where I've really gone away. I was all about the slider for a while, like everyone else, and then I kind of got bored with it, and I realized it doesn't do much. And I started turning a lot of my slider shots into dolly ins and outs, because those seem to carry a lot more emotional impact than just sliding. Though, you know, sometimes it's just to add visual interest. It's just to move the background, have a bit of parallaxing during somebody who's interviewing, especially if it's a corporate thing where the guy's kind of, you know, dry and boring and stuff like that. A little bit of, if you have an interesting background, a little bit of parallaxing can help add interest to the shot. But I try to do it subtly, and I try to do very little of it. Just because I'm kind of bored with the slider thing, and I find myself taking my slider out less and less often. But something like this, especially if you don't have the strongest slider in the world, or you don't usually carry around a lot of light stands or other things to prop up your slider, this could be a great thing to travel with too. If you've got, you know, a slider that you hike with or something like that, this could be a way to kind of keep you from carrying around too much crap.
Yeah, you know, I still do a lot of slider shots. Honestly, my Shark slider, I love that thing. The whole weight and you know, gear system that makes it really easy to slow and speed up. But I tend to do a lot more sliding subtly, you know, zoomed in or zooming in while I'm sliding back or something like that to give kind of that Hitchcock look.
Push pull.
Yeah, push pull. I always call it the Hitchcock zoom, but you know, whatever.
Trombone shot. It's got 50 names because no one can make up their mind.
Yeah, and it looks freaking cool. It's really great when you're trying to do that dramatic character runs up to the screen and like looks around, and you want to like get, you know, show a little bit of suspense. Also, it's really great when you're transitioning from one room to the other. You can kind of transition to the doorway, and then in post you just cut with the doorway as your transition and then into another room, and that gives you a beautiful way to transition from room to room without actually having to physically shoot each of those spots. So there are a lot of cool ways to use sliders other than the traditional, hey, I'm going to put you on a table and move back and forth continuously for 20 minutes while someone talks into the camera, because that's a little bit obnoxious. The other one I did, Eldercron is the name of the brand I was trying to come up with. So the other thing, and this is kind of off on the slider note here, Eldercron has that tracking rig that allows you to kind of just rotate the camera back and forth at the same point and degree. So that is actually kind of nice if you slow it way down so you have just a touch of motion the entire time while you're doing an interview or something like that. So maybe that isn't too much. Maybe I'm complaining too heavily about sliders, but mine gets packed with me the same as my little pocket crane. Both of those, at first I was using them a little bit too much. I got excited about them, same as you. Really wanted to just use them for every shot, and then I realized, minute, this is dumb. You know, you can't do that. And in fact, the other thing that happens with the slider is it takes time to set it up every single time, and that eats into your shooting time. And so if you try to make every shot a slider shot, you're tearing the slider down from one setting, moving it over to another place, setting it back up again, and that just adds so much freaking time to your workflow. Whereas if you go through the script and you look and you say, okay, I've got these shots right here that I definitely need a slider for, and that's it. Then you have somebody setting the slider up for you before you move into that shot. You take that shot, and then you move on back to tripod mount or handheld or whatever you're doing, and that saves you from going slider, 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 crane, slider, crane. You know, it's just, it turns into a vicious cycle of eating up an entire day of shooting just because you're using a slider for every single freaking.
And I think too that real quick, last thing about the sliders, just that is thinking about the edit. If you're going to do sliders, I think that can go a long way, because you know it gets annoying or repetitive to keep having like sliding left, sliding right, sliding left when you're going through B-roll shots or something like that. And just the same way that you should be, you know, looking at a pan or a jib shot or any kind of camera move, a lot of the time is to look at where it starts. Does that make a composition? And where does it end? And does that make a composition? And if you don't have an interesting composition that's different in those two shots, then moving the camera is not going to do a lot for your story or whatever you're trying to produce or adding visual interest. So if you start thinking like that, then you'll know kind of, hey, it would be cool to do a slider here because I've got parallaxing and I can kind of reframe and focus during my parallaxing and make a really interesting shot that's bringing in together all these elements, as opposed to just like, oh, here's the product and I'm kind of moving it slightly, you know? So it's one of those where you should be thinking about where do I start, where do I end, and be more about hitting a start point and hitting an end point than just I'm sliding from the end of each rail.
I know it's a little bit weird, but I have actually a list of things that I generally tend to use the slider for. And anytime they'll show up, I'm just like, yep, slider, definitely. Nothing else. Don't worry about it. And one of them is actually the reveal. So whenever you have one character behind another character and you just want to slide to the side to reveal that they're behind you, that is the perfect way to use it. For me, anyway.
Absolutely, yeah.
That is the perfect way to use a slider. So that happens quite a bit. If you start watching a lot of my work, you'll see me use that shot over and over again. Same thing with the doorway transition. I love following a character to the doorway and then transitioning to a completely different room by using the doorway as a benchmark. And so I do that quite a bit. And the other slider thing that I love to do besides the Hitchcock zoom is actually to zoom, or is to slide down at an object like a phone or something like that when it's supposed to ring or something's supposed to happen with it, or you want to show a knife laying on the ground. And I'm speaking from a horror perspective here, you know, shooting a lot of horror films over the years. That's where I really love the slider, and it gets used for that constantly. Anytime I see a shot where it's like, oh, yep, that's got a knife on the ground, better use the slider. Oh, walking through a doorway, better use the slider. Oh, you know, there's a character standing behind you, better use the slider. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe those
no, but
they're just like rules I follow, so that way it's always visually pleasing to the people that are watching it.
Because you're subconsciously using them to make the shots impactful. A knife on the ground that's slowly getting larger and coming at you, that's like a foreboding, ominous kind of part of your story that you're telling there. So it's you just know instinctively. You're like, oh, a slider for this shot would really add some weight and some importance to the shot. But that's part of it too, is you're not using it all the time. You use a slider all the time, it doesn't become an interesting part of the shot anymore. It just becomes like every other shot. And it's important to have your ups and downs when you're telling your stories. So
now, one other thing, man, we beat this slider thing to death.
we really have.
For product shots, if you ever get into the situation where you need a good product shot and you want it to really like have more than just one dimension, a slider combined with one of those spinning tables is a really cool effect.
A lazy Susan?
Yeah, well, I guess it's called a lazy Susan. I buy I had an actual one it's like $50. They're a product display table that actually spins. It supports 85 pounds. You can buy them on eBay. You plug them in. You just click it on. It has like 3 or 4 speeds, and you set your product on there, and then you set your slider at the appropriate distance, and you can slide by it as the product is rotating. So you're getting 2 bits of motion that kind of just like make it look really cool. And especially if your product has a flat side that has like sparkles, for example, or something that just like controls or whatever, you can actually start from one side when the controls are facing the camera, and as it turns, follow it all the way around to the other side so that you catch it, you know, the controls are in frame basically the entire shot until it leaves the frame as it's rotating. And I find that to be extremely attractive looking when I'm doing those. You know, maybe I stand alone on this, but I love using the rotating table with the slider for product shots. And I don't do it all the time. A lot of times, you know, actually most of the time, just a spinning product is fine. You don't really need to get that crazy. But adding that extra little bit and getting the shot, sometimes you're like, hey, look at this. And they're like, oh, that's amazing. You know, go with that from now on. We are sold. We want our product to always have, you know, the spinning table with the motion slider going past. So just some ways to think about it and practice these shots before you go out. Make sure you know how you need to set things up and what you need to do as far as controlling your zoom and everything else so that you are ready to go when you take these out. Otherwise, you're going to be delaying production and messing things up. And it's never good to look like the fool when you are trying to get your gear out to do something and you haven't tested or practiced it beforehand. You just heard somebody talk about it and thought it'd be a great thing to use.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And finding what's right for you and experimenting. That's always important.
Now, we talked about this on the last cast, and this is kind of moving on from the slider topic, which we've dug into the ground, is CPUs. I talked about this on the last episode with Mitch, and I thought I'd bring it up with you too, because you're a little bit more computer savvy. Mitch is more of a Mac user, doesn't really care about internal parts. This is the E3 1231 version 3 Xeon E3 processor. This guy is about $245, and it's basically an i7 4770 for about $100 less than the current line of i7 processors. The difference is this doesn't have the built-in graphics card that comes with the regular consumer grade i7 processors. So you're missing out on that HD 4000, whatever they call it, GPU that's built into the chipset.
Yes.
But for the most part, if you're going to be editing or gaming or anything else, you're probably going to have a nice graphics card installed in your system. So this saves you $100, maybe $80, depending on what sales are going on. And that's money that can be spent somewhere else. Now, Devin, I'm sure you're going to get further into this than I am, but one thing that's noted here is that this doesn't allow for overclocking. It is a Xeon processor. It has a bunch of extra stuff in it that you don't normally use for consumer stuff. You're not going to be using any of the emulation type stuff that's used for running virtual machines and things like that. So that isn't really going to help anybody, but it saves you $100. I mean, you could spend that on RAM, you could spend that on an SSD, you could get a nicer motherboard, or you could put that towards a GPU where it needs to go, as opposed to your CPU itself. What do you think about the oddly named 1231 version 3 Xeon processor?
No, I think it's definitely, for the money, it's probably the most CPU that you can get for that money. It's I do believe, though, without the onboard graphics card, you lose quick sync, which isn't something that Premiere natively supports. It is something that I've seen people add to Premiere for the encoding process, and I haven't really seen how far people have taken quick sync in terms of editing. I know that if you've got the programs that use quick sync, I've tried them myself for just converting video to a mobile format to take with.
Really, how well does it work? Is it worth doing?
I would say it's about 15 to 20% faster than my CUDA card, which right now is like a 680 Ti or something like that, which has plenty of CUDA cores and stuff like that. Maybe the Titan is faster than the Intel right now in my i7. But the quick sync I did find to be a little bit faster. The quality was pretty much about the same between the two in terms of H.264 encoding, but quick sync will do H.264 encoding on the fly, and I did hack, I think, CS6 a little while last year to try to do the quick sync thing. I didn't notice any huge speed improvements, but then again, that I stopped using it. So maybe people have like taken it, advanced it further, or something like that. Some people use it, some people don't. It comes down to what your preferences are, but I think that is something to keep in mind. Without the GPU in there, I'm pretty sure you lose the quick sync ability, because this is just a server processor. It doesn't need quick sync. If you're willing to spend more than $340 though, because I think that an amazing price right now for a processor, for a system, if I was to build a new one today, because I was kind of looking at building computers for a little while, and I probably will soon. Of course, you're trying to find that price break. You're trying to find, hey, where can I get a bunch of cycles, best bang for the buck kind of a deal. And you don't always want to buy necessarily the best, because, for example, there's a 4930K, which is an i7 processor, and I believe it's Ivy Bridge, and it sells for like $580. But
you're talking about going to the LGA 2011 socket, aren't you?
Yes.
Then
Yes, I am.
So
I'm talking about the 2011 socket.
there's some benefits and not so much. As far as rendering performance goes, if you're just focused on CPU only, the 5820, I believe, and the newer version that you just mentioned, both of those they're within basically spitting distance for speed of the i7 4770 and the 4790, the newer version. So that part isn't so hot, but the positive side is that they have more channels available, so you can have up to 64 gigs of RAM as opposed to 32 gigs of RAM, and that is something that
especially
is
for After Effects. Yeah, if you're doing After Effects and you're doing renders, that 64 part is huge. But
not even full renders. If you just want to watch your timeline in real time, honestly,
depending on your projects.
I was working on a 40-second special effects clip last week, and 40 seconds, I could only render out to RAM about 25 seconds, and then that was it. And that was basically like stealing all the system RAM I had available minus 4 gig for the operating system. So, you know, having 64 gig of RAM available for that sort of like live playback is pretty sexy. And that almost pushed me over the edge to go with an LGA 2011 socket as opposed to the 1150 socket. But then the problem is the 2011 is the previous generation, and there's already talk that they're going to basically get rid of it and move on to a new socket set. And they already did that just 2 years ago. You had the 1155, and now you have the 1150, and that basically eliminated the upgrade path for people. And they have the version 3 of the 2011, which kind of blocked the use of the newer chip on some of the older LG 2011 motherboards. So it's kind of a weird area right now where I know, what is it? Skylane, I believe, is the next generation that's coming out.
I think so. Yeah.
They're talking about that at the middle to end of this year. So if that's the case, then you go ahead and you invest in this, and then there is no upgrade path for the next cycle. And these cycles generally last 3 years, probably 2.5 years. So, you know, that you're basically blocked from getting anything fancier. Plus, they're starting to sort of move into DDR4 memory. It's still super expensive right now, and they haven't really found a sweet spot where it makes it advantageous to move there yet. But that's going to be big in probably another 7 to 10 months, and then you're kind of out of that gate as well. I don't know if you agree. I mean, but those are sort of the concerns to think about.
If you've got money to buy into the next line of processors and get a decent one at that, then that's always the smarter decision to go with. I was looking for trying to middle of the ground kind of a budget thing for myself personally. And that's why I was looking at the 5820K, because for about $400, you get the performance of what basically every other architecture is charging you $600 for. I don't know why the 6-core i7 is so much cheaper than a lot of them. It is the slowest 2011 2012 V3 socket type that there is. But lo and behold, it's a really good price for the amount of performance you get, because if you go to any other architecture, any other socket, you'll spend $600 getting the performance that you get out of this CPU. So that's why I've been attracted to it, because it's just been sitting at that price. It's not on sale or anything like that. That's what they came out with, and it's been kind of sitting at like 400, 390. I think I see it for 380 on a few sites. And so it's one of those that if you're looking for kind of a mid-range system and you don't care about necessarily having the latest, which most of the case I don't. I usually buy a generation or two behind. That kind of thing is perfect for what I'm looking for, because I'm still rolling around with a 2700K. That, you know,
hey, that's not a bad processor, man.
It's not. I've got it overclocked to 4.8, and it works really well for what it is, but I'm kind of just finally getting my use out of it. And we'll probably look at selling it soon.
Yeah, actually I still have a couple of systems that are in storage right now. They were in full use in the studio before I moved, and those are still running I think i7 920s, which that's like the very first or second generation of i7 processors. And I think it's a 2.8 gigahertz system, and you know, they do a good job. They overclock well, and they run pretty well. Like, it's been solid. It's a fairly hot CPU. I think it's 125 watts or 130 watt TDP envelope, but still.
But at this point, the laptop you just bought has more i7 power than.
Oh yeah,
your
but
920.
The 920, like, okay, say you want to just do some gaming or something like that, or in the case, I use it in the studio for recording. So when I need to record multi-channel audio, I would plug an interface into that computer. I would have 24 tracks of audio to work with, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, you slap a couple of fast hard drives in there. I have 24 gigs of RAM in there. It's ready to roll, and it does a fine job with it. And it's not that bad, and it's fully decked out. So it's like, well, yeah, exactly.
It's
so
$80.
You're just like, well, you know, leave it alone. Like, that system, I paid for it. It's still working. And that's the thing that they're running into now with CPUs, is like, even your 2700, that is not far enough behind that you're going to see a huge performance jump going even to the 4790 that's out right now.
It's
so
not going to be like when I went from my Q6600, which is basically two Core 2 Duo stuck together and emulating a quad core. I jumped from that to this 2700. That was a world of difference, but I think I also spent $1,000 on this 2700 when it came out.
Yeah, so just think about what you need. If you do have all the money to spend on computer parts, then go ahead, do it. I don't have the top of the line gear, but I do have a lot of extravagant things in my system that I probably don't need to. And look at me, I had to replace an entire motherboard because the USB 3 ports all went sideways on me. So, spending all the money doesn't necessarily guarantee you the best performance.
And
on that note, go ahead.
I was going to say, and if you're not a computer builder, you don't have to be if you want to be an editor. My recommendation is always Dell has on Amazon.
Oh, yeah. Their Dell systems, man, they're ready to go. They make them. They make units that are basically dedicated for studio environment for editing. They're already optimized for whatever, if you call Dell and say, hey, I do a lot of Adobe Premiere work, I need a computer that's optimized. They have, I think it's is it the Optron line, Optitron, something like that.
Well, usually they'll try to sell you on the XPS.
Well, yeah, but the XPS, that label is on so many of Dell's products that you're like, what does XPS mean? But they actually have I think the system started about $3,000. They're a little expensive, but they come with a 4K monitor. They come with trial versions of a bunch of editing suites that are optimized for video editing and production work like that. And they sell a ton of units because they are cheaper than the high-end version of the Mac Pro tower, trash can tower, whatever you want to call that thing. And they have much better specs and they come with a beautiful monitor. So it's a really good deal. And then they're refurbished units too. And I think you were about to mention that before I cut you off. They have a ton of great deals. Dell does this thing where, something gets sent in, they send the person out a new one, and then they fix whatever's wrong with the unit that came in, and then they'll sell it refurbished. And when it gets sold refurbished, the price drops by $1,000 or $1,500 sometimes, and it becomes a really awesome deal. And then they still can sell you an extended warranty for 3 or 4 years if you want, and that way your system's protected for basically the lifespan of when you're going to be editing with that before you need to move on to something else. So
and definitely on the budget thing, if you're looking for a budget machine and you're not interested necessarily in building computers, to give you a rough idea, for somewhere between $650 and $800, you can get a Dell refurbished XPS tower that's got an i7 that's faster than what I got, something like a 4790, 12 gigabytes of RAM, an NVIDIA GeForce 720, which has enough CUDA cores to get the job done, on a 1 terabyte hard drive, and a DVD burner and Windows 7 and all the things you need to have a normal computer operate. So
now this isn't a computer cast, but one more thing to talk about real quick. And just if you are planning to try and build your own system, one of the sites I definitely recommend, especially if you're kind of a novice builder, is to swing over to pcpartpicker.com and go through some of the builds that they have already kind of demonstrated and done benchmarks on and so on. And they have a price range. They have a list of gear that's gone into the system and kind of what the people are using it for. And there's a lot of great ideas for under $1,000. There's a lot of CPUs that people don't think about, or if they're just doing a certain type of thing like rendering video or something like that, maybe they don't need to go with an i7 processor. Maybe they can up their graphics card quite a bit and go with an i5 4690 or something like that. And then they have money in their budget for, say, an R9 290X or a GTX 980 or 970. So go to pcpartpicker.com and take a look around. That has some really good suggestions on system builds and budgeting for a large studio setup if that's what you're after. Now, speaking of budget, Devin, I'm going to throw this one over to you. This is that weird C-mount. It looks like Canon XI, 50 millimeter 0.75 lens, and it's $400. What?
Yeah, it's gigantic glass. It's C-mount. I haven't used it yet. I've been trying to find some videos that show people using it because it's not a common lens, but a lot of these have started popping up on eBay for some reason, and they are just. It's a very unique look. It's a very interesting look. I see some people mounting them to Fujis, which makes me think that they're C-mount. or something along those lines. But the lens is huge. I mean, we're talking about if you've got a T2i attached to this thing, it's going to be bigger than your T2i. And that's how it gets all that speed at 0.75. I don't know what the sensor coverage is. It's one of those things that I can't find anything reliable about it. But you know what? It looks like, yeah, it may be kind of soft around the edges and may have a bit of vignetting, but it's one of those that it goes, hey, this is a really cool lens for $400 for something like maybe to play with, for a specialty, for like music video, doing something really, crazy, have a different look in your videos. Because I'm always kind of looking for cheap, old specialty lenses that can give my projects a different kind of look compared to what a lot of other people have. And if 400 is too much for you, there's a lot of 65 millimeters on there at 0.75 for $150, way cheaper. So it's one of those that I find it here and there, and I find people talk about it, and I just don't see a lot of them anywhere that you can buy it. And I just noticed some of them popped up on eBay. And so when you look at some of the sample images, when it's wide open, it does have soft edges and everything else, and you close it down and it looks beautiful. So it looks like Canon glass, but I think it was definitely intended to be used with security cameras or something of that sort for doing low light.
Now I'm looking at eBay right now, and I'm finding these under other labels besides Canon. It looks like Kowa, Kowa, is another label that you'll find actually a ton of these under.
Oh, yeah?
I'm not sure. Yeah, so maybe they are the manufacturers, and Canon may have branded this somehow. This is the one I'm looking at right now, and I'm going to actually share the screen so everybody can see this. This is a 65 millimeter f7.75, and this thing is huge. It looks like 129, and there are a bunch of other focal lengths here. Here's a 42 millimeter. Here's a 33.5 millimeter, and this is the same Kowa, $150, and this is a f0.95. I have no idea what the coverage is on this, as you mentioned, but they're all sort of these like barrel mount, probably surveillance camera, maybe something like that. If you're rib cage owner, that adapter for GoPro that allows C-mount and so on to be adapted to it, this could give you a lens that's actually twice as big as your camera body. But
yeah,
these do look interesting. Man, the prices are right, but I don't know. With a GH4, you would definitely have to go to crop mode in order to get full coverage, I think.
It depends.
I'm guessing on that because I'm looking at these mounts here, and it really depends on how they sit on the sensor and what kind of adapter you end up using. Maybe with the pocket camera, that's 3x crop, so
yeah,
you
the pocket
might get
camera
full
would be
coverage
fine.
without too much vignetting.
As somebody who messed around with some C-mount lenses before I gave them off to a friend, a lot of CCTV lenses and stuff like that, there's actually a few of them that'll do full coverage on a GH3 or GH4, but they're kind of soft around the edges. They aren't super sharp, but they do have full coverage. But as far as I've seen, just about every one of these CCTV lenses on a Blackmagic Pocket does have full coverage. So in that case, I'm pretty sure it would work just fine for a Blackmagic, though your 50 is going to be a 150. That's always something to keep in mind with that 3x crop. But in here, it's just one of those where like, the price is kind of right for some of this stuff is something really interesting or specialty lens, like I said, as a creative thing, not something like, go on, buy this lens, you'll make amazing images with it. But something that's different, because I keep looking at sample photos and there's some that I love and some that I go, that looks like crap.
Okay,
So,
I found some more specs on this. It looks like the image diameter for the rear element is 25 millimeters. So for whatever that's worth, that's about your coverage space there. And this is a 2.5 pound lens. 2.5 pounds. So these are pretty monstrous, man. And it looks like some of the descriptions here, there's a few questions and answers. S35 millimeter, Super S16. So take a look around. These are some weird lenses. I don't really know what the heck they hook onto, but man, they're kind of cool. Yeah, it looks like that Kowa brand seems to be the most popular on eBay right now. So try searching for that, and it looks like it brings up a wide variety of lenses. Kawa, however you pronounce that. We actually had a news article, last week or 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. They had the green micro four thirds lenses that they were coming out with, and there were a couple of wide angles and so on. So maybe look into that. Their old lenses, though, they appear to be the exact same as the ones that you were pointing out with the Canon label on it. And the price is down $125 or best offer, $150 or best offer. And they have a few more focal length ranges. So definitely look at that. Thanks to Devin for pointing that one out, because I did not see those wonky things. Holy crap. Okay, I got to share this last picture I saw you put in the show notes here.
Yeah.
This just to give you guys an idea of what this looks like. Here it is on a Nikon body that appears to be maybe a D5200 or something of that nature. And it's huge. It's just ridiculous sized. So, wow, look at that thing. Man, what a weird deal. On that note, oh, wait, there's more pictures? Holy man, now I have okay, for those of you listening to the cast, I apologize. You might want to swing over to the show notes or check out the YouTube channel, but this is just ridiculous. This is this is looking like the legendary Canon 50mm f1.0 lens sort of thing. So
yeah,
that doesn't look too bad. $150, man.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you said, don't go out and just buy this on our recommendation. I haven't even used this lens. I'm just looking at how crazy it is. And it's kind of like, man, I want to mess with that.
Yeah. Just something, a new toy to play around with.
So on that note, Devin, I know we've kind of kicked out the show notes pretty fast here. Do you have any picks of the week or anything you want to recommend to everybody besides this lens, or are you going to just call this your pick of the week?
No, my pick of the week is BitTorrent Sync, but I think we've already done that one, and they called it Sync 2.0. But just a use case of how I used it while I was out traveling. All I had was a MacBook Air with an i5 with no GPU, so rendering was kind of out of the question. But I still had a lot of work I needed to catch up on, so I actually stored all the files on a flash drive. Which I had an HP flash drive that had, somewhere in the 200s for read and write speed, enough to kind of edit some of this H.264 footage. And using BitTorrent Sync, I already had it synced locally on my network before I left. And then after that, all I was syncing was really project files and a few music files and other things that I added to it. So I could edit away on the laptop, which wasn't amazingly fast, but you can still cut footage and assemble. And then I would go over and remote desktop into my PC, open up the project file that was already synced, and then hit render. And so it made it so I could use a very underpowered laptop to edit without necessarily editing through remote desktop, which is always kind of frustrating because audio doesn't always sync up and stuff like that. So for me, it was a quick fix, kind of the best of both worlds, where I can edit like it's local while also not spending all night with my laptop just whirring away trying to render, half an hour of footage.
So let me get this straight. You basically were cutting the project together on your laptop, and then you sent the project file back to your main desktop, or you synced it back to your main desktop, rendered it off of your GPU there by leaving that computer online, and then just downloaded the file or put it back in your sync folder so that you could sync the rendered file out and then look at whatever you'd done to make sure everything's good to go.
And even to upload it from home, sometimes I had hotels with crappy internet. So when the client says, hey, can you upload that to Vimeo for me? I rendered it on the desktop at home and uploaded to Vimeo. Only took me half an hour, as opposed to if I had trying to use an i5 MacBook Air, it would have taken me all night to render and upload. So.
Oh man. Yeah. And then on top of that, you can render, or you can upload on your home network as opposed to your motel network, and get all that extra speed advantage of, 50 megs up, or, 10 megs up, or whatever you have available at home. Yeah. That's not a bad idea, man. Actually, I've tried to remote edit before. For some reason, I thought it was a good idea one time. I've got my Nexus 7 here, and I was like, oh man, guess what? I can actually log into my system and run everything with, this hokey mouse sort of interface. And it ended up being awful, and it's laggy, audio is really weird, especially if you forget to turn your speakers off and the computer is a couple rooms away. You can actually hear the delay in audio from one to the other. And it was basically worthless. But for what you're doing, you're really not using it for live editing. You're just using it as a renderer, and that's it. So that's a pretty cool way to go. I'm going to go on that note there.
Yeah, that sync too is free for 10 folders. So And the thing is it does sync over LAN, and that was probably the best feature, was the fact that I could have my laptop here before I left and get all the files synced up and get everything organized and ready to go, so that then when I left, the only thing I was syncing over the internet was basically project files and any other assets I had to add to the project, which wasn't much. So I wasn't downloading and uploading a ton of footage over, you know, cellular connections or whatever else I could find. So it kept my data use really minimal, and then still gave me the ability, the power of like finally rendering it out. Of course, you know, your mileage will vary depending on what kind of laptop you're using. But in my situation, Creative Cloud lets you basically sign into two computers simultaneously, for the fact of if you have two operating systems or you have a laptop and a desktop. So I took full advantage of that. So I could edit Premiere remotely and still have Premiere open at home, and then go ahead and do my renders and upload.
Yeah, now quick tip on that. Actually, I have Premiere Pro installed on this desktop that I'm working on now. I have it installed on my laptop, and I have it installed on a couple of other laptops. And as long as you log out of each of your sessions and then log into the computer you're using, they'll actually let you install it a bunch of times on a bunch of different stuff. You just need to make sure to log out. So, and I think I've talked about this before, but if you're trying to save a little bit of money and you work with other editors, you can share a copy. I mean, I don't know how technically legal this is, so, you know, just it's gray territory. But you log out and he uses your ID and logs in. He can edit on his end. You do whatever you're doing, you know, go to work or whatever. And when you come back, you log in and log him out, and then you have access to all of your Premiere Pro and Cloud Suite. So then you're in a good spot. The other cool thing is, and if you aren't familiar with BitTorrent Sync and you want to just use something very simple, the Adobe Cloud product basically gives you, I believe it's 20 gig worth of storage. Not a huge amount, but what ends up happening for me a lot of times is my assets are duplicated for everybody that's working on the project. So all the video files that I have a copy of it. The other editor I'm working with has a copy of it. If there's somebody working on color, he's got a copy of everything, and all those guys have that duplicated. So they really only need the project files in order to get things working. So in that regard, Adobe has a really easy, pretty seamless way to save your project files directly to Adobe CC, and then you can just download them or send them to whoever, or share project files or whatever. So if you don't want to get into the little bit more technical version of BitTorrent Sync, the cloud sharing option is really nice. And
what everyone should do, because I learned this kind of the hard way, and it would have saved my butt, is that the updated version of Premiere for the Creative Cloud, its autosave has an ability to take your project file and save it to the cloud automatically. It's independent of any files or anything else, but it's one of those that if you're in the middle of working and whatever drive you're working on goes to crap, let's say you don't have backups or you don't have a RAID, but you still have source footage, and you worked a bunch of hours on a project file that now you can't open, and for whatever reason, because the drive went bad, you also can't open up the autosaves either. You can set up inside of the preferences for Premiere that to automatically upload the save files to the cloud when you save. And so therefore, then, you know, you've always got a copy of that project file that you spent forever working on, that you could relink your media, as long as, you know, you have a backup copy of your media at least. So I recommend everyone turns that on, because a project file is only a few megabytes. It's not going to chew up your 20 gigs at all of space. And it's just nice to have, you know, another copy out there in the cloud in case something goes wrong.
Now, that's a really good point. And the other thing, and this is just my personal method for editing, and, you know, maybe this will help someone out, is every time I open up a project to continue working on it, I save it new with basically the date stamp for the day I'm working on it. And the reason I do that is because I've had people in the past where I finish an edit for the day and they're like, I don't like that. I want what you did yesterday. So go back to that. And for the longest time, I was just, you know, saving as I go and not really doing anything. So I'd worked for maybe 2 or 3 days on this project, done some pretty intensive changes to it, turned it over, and they're like, nope, don't like it. Go back to the way it was before. And you're like, what? And then I realized that I had been working on the same project file the entire time, and I hadn't been saving revisions. Now, luckily, I have Premiere set up to do an auto save every 20 minutes, and I have mine set to save 100 auto saves. So luckily,
the files are so small.
Yeah, they're only like 20 meg or 10 meg, something like that. It's pretty insignificant. So luckily, because of that rather ridiculous policy I've put in place for myself, I was able to go back and get that. But then I was thinking about it and I'm like, man, really? I have 100 or so plus copies of that same file just saving on a regular basis. I need to do something better. So from then on, what I started doing is every time I opened up the project to start editing anew, I would just change the date. And then that way too, if you are going through and you have a bunch of stuff that's labeled like, I don't know, I just worked on a music video and you named it music video number 1. Well, if you are number 2, number 3, number 4, you don't know which one is the latest revision. But if you have a date on it, you're like, oh yeah, look at that. There's the date right there. That's the newest version. And the date that you put on there may not actually match the file save date that shows up in your regular view because maybe that one's based on the creation date or on something else because you set up your view on your folders to be something a little bit wacky or weird. So just something to think about. Definitely that saving backups online is always a good deal. I also email them out to other editors on top of that. I know this is getting really weird, but I find that if I burn down a computer for some reason, if I've emailed it to someone else after I've finished a copy, then it's in my email box and it's in their email box. So that's sort of the off property backup system. Okay, that's bad. I don't know about the emailing one. That might get really messy after a while. So,
but backups are important. The moral of the story.
Yeah. And also go to your settings immediately and set up autosave for every 10 or 15 minutes. I know it sounds obnoxious, and it is sometimes when you're in the middle of hitting play and then it just stops and all of a sudden the autosave pops up. But the minute your computer crashes and you lose an hour or 2 hours worth of work that you have to repeat again, that totally messes up your day. And it can really put you behind in your workflow if you have a deadline that you need to meet or something like that.
Absolutely.
On that note, I think we have dug this cast into the ground. Yeah. It is an hour and 5 minutes long. Devin, where can people find you at?
People can find me at impulsenetworks.tv, where I do reviews of a few gears, and hopefully I'll be uploading some creative stuff that happened over my trip very soon once I get them edited.
And as always for this podcast, make sure you click like on the iTunes store if you're getting it from iTunes. You can find this anywhere podcasts are distributed, so check it out on SoundCloud or wherever. And you can find me at DSLRFilmNoob.com. I will be updating again starting on Monday. I am finally in a place where I have enough internet, by which I mean I am using 657 gigs so far of cell phone internet, and I'm done with that downloading projects, so I can get back to work on regular stuff. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys, and we will catch you next week on another episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. And we're out. That is the end of the audio portion. I have an editing session coming up in, I'm probably about 15 minutes late for it, but that's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I already texted my co-editor and told him that I wasn't going to be on. Those of you that are still watching the video version, really cool thing that you can do with Hangouts, and I've been doing this almost continuously. I used to work with an editor in person all the time, and he lives about 6 states away now. So we are working on the project simultaneously together by using the share view feature in Hangouts, and he can basically follow along with me as I work on the project, and then I can follow along with him as he recommends changes and so on. And it's been going really well. So that is... I think I did mention that. I might have mentioned that a few casts back, but yeah, totally great way. Also, I had a couple of clients that I had to turn stuff over for, even though I moved. And it was really nice to go through the final edit with them watching it alongside me while we were using Google Hangouts. And it's so simple because they just click on the link and it goes, and then they can see what I'm doing. And so there was a few bits where we needed musical cues to come in and go out, and that worked really well for, okay, move that back to the start of this clip. I want that moved over here. I want you to loop this section here and bring it back together. And that was super smooth. So yeah, Hangouts, once your computer is working again and your USB ports are working correctly, it is a blessing to use. So, yeah. Anything else to add, Devin, before I stop the live broadcast?
Yeah, and if you write too, I mean, Writer Duet is free to use, and it's got voice chat / video chat, as well as you both can look at the same document and edit the same document. It's like Google Docs, but for script writing. So it's got all the formatting and all the shortcuts that you need in order to do script writing effectively.
And what was that called again?
Writer Duet.
Writer Duet. I will write that down.
I'm a big fan of it. I've used it on a few projects. Also, too, I mean, I don't work for it. I don't even think I've bought the desktop copy yet. But Writer Duet for free as well will also import cell text, Final Draft. I think Fade Out. I'm not totally sure on that. As well as export those as well. So you can even import from other projects and export. It doesn't support some of the smaller ones like Adobe Story and stuff like that, but yeah, real-time collaboration. It's got offline support. If you pay money, it'll like also sync with your Dropbox too if you're paranoid about keeping it on his server or whatever. But
I haven't really had to get involved in the script writing process very much over the years, so I've never really had to come up with anything clever. But I'm looking, this is only $89 and $49 for the student version. That's not too bad.
No, it's really not. But the thing is too is that online you can use the software for free. So it's definitely one of those where you can actually completely write something out and be allowed to export it to whatever kind of formats you want before you decide to buy it if you really need those extra features. But it includes a small music player. It also lets you just share via email. People don't have to create logins, if I remember right. So, and there's also a group chat and stuff like that. So it's added lots of little features that really make it useful and easy to use. Oh, also supports PDFs as well. I don't know how it does that kind of witchcraft, but it also supports PDFs. So you can import and export PDFs.
Well, there are a ton of stuff or a ton of programs now that import and export PDFs. So I don't know what they've done trickery
for screenwriting, like for formatting. Because usually I've got. Oh, okay. I haven't run those. So.
There's a couple like I don't know how it works or why, but they actually will recognize all the text inside of a PDF, and they can move stuff around, and you can edit it like you would in a Word document. So. They're not specifically for screenwriting, but they are basically give you all of the editing formatting options that you want. So you could format it however and move things around. And I'm not sure if it's just saving it into some sort of like cache and then rewriting it out to a PDF once it's done, because there's compression and stuff going on in the background. So I don't know what exactly happens, but I also have and this is kind of going off the rails here, but there's an app for Android phones. It's called Easy PDF. And if someone sends you a bunch of PDFs and you're supposed to read it, but you don't have enough time to sit down, or you don't want to stare at your screen for a long time, that app actually has a reading function in it that you can throw on a pair of headphones, go for a jog, and listen to the entire PDF before. So it's a robot voice, so it's not the nicest way to listen, but definitely, like if I'm working on a project where I haven't used a device for quite a while and I want to be familiar with it again, I will grab their manual and throw it on my headphones and listen to the manual, the sections that are pertinent, or I'll break the PDF and listen to them. And that way, when I get there, you don't remember everything, of course, but now you have the manual kind of floating around in your head. You just kind of went through it, you listen to it, and then bam, when you get there, like someone's like, hey, what is this format and why does it do this? And you're like, oh yeah, because I just listened to this in the thing and I know exactly what it does and this is what's going on. And then you can
really
just nail it. And it definitely helps to make you like that little extra bit professional when you're trying to figure out, what's going on. And, sometimes you don't mess with gear for 6 months or a year at a time, and you're trying to remember, like, how did that work again? But by going through the manual and listening to it while you're doing other stuff, it just gives you that extra edge that like refreshes everything and kind of re-solidifies it in your brain so you know what's up again.
Oh, that's a really clever idea.
Just some of the pro life hacking tips from DJ Sharton. On that note, guys, I'm going to stop the live broadcast now. See you next time.